It's bigger than just a game.
Keep your eye on number 22. Martin looking. Here's Clark. She fires and goes!
These moments have a greater impact on the next generation. She wants to be strong like her, determined like her, confident like her, win like her. This is why we do it. We are on the rise, and it's only the beginning for her. It's time to support her. Together, Hawkeye Women Rise.
On the Hawkeye Sports Network from Learfield, this is the Hawkeye Women Rise podcast, presented by the Iowa City Area Sports Commission.
My entire life had revolved around competitive sport. And so it was that experience that gave me the drive to try to change things.
Because we have nothing to lose and we have absolutely everything to gain.
Hawkeye Women Rise podcast highlights the past, present, and future of Iowa women's sports. We tell remarkable stories, highlight incredible accomplishments both in competition and life. Feel inspired by the stories of adversity overcome and celebrate Iowa women's athletics. Together, Hawkeye Women Rise. Live from the Iowa Athletic Club in the Iowa River Landing, this is Hawkeye Women Rise, presented by the Iowa City Area Sports Commission. Here's the host of Hawkeye Women Rise, Iowa tennis coach Sasha Schmid.
Hello, Hawk fans, and welcome to the Hawkeye Women Rise podcast here in the Iowa River Landing, hosted by the Athletic Club and sponsored by the Iowa City Area Sports Commission. We are so grateful for our sponsorship. I'm excited to be with you in the month of March. The months just keep going by. We have a very special edition of our show today. March is also a time when we celebrate women's history. And this episode, we have the perfect guest to join us to give us the historical context that we need to be able to put this moment in time that we are all experiencing here in Iowa City and at the University of Iowa within our women's athletic teams and specifically within women's basketball. I have my good friend Amy Wilson joining us today. Amy, thank you for joining us on Hawkeye Women Rise.
It's a pleasure to be here, Sasha. Thank you for having me.
Well, for those of you who don't know, let me just introduce Amy. Dr. Amy Wilson serves as our NCAA Managing Director of Inclusion, where she drives an inclusive excellence culture throughout college athletics by supporting member institutions' commitment to diversity, inclusion, and gender equity among all student athletes, coaches, and administrators. And Amy has an incredible tie to the University of Iowa. She studied here and received her PhD from the University of Iowa, and she was Dr. Christine Grant's last PhD student. Amy, tell us a little bit about your connection to Iowa and what it means to come on back to Iowa City this weekend.
Yeah, I left in the middle of the night to get here in time for the basketball game on Sunday, and it just felt like coming home. This is a really special place for me. I came here as a young professional wanting to learn gender equity in Title IX so I could make a difference. And one of the best decisions of my life was to choose to study with Dr. Grant and other really great scholars here at the University of Iowa. So it was some of the best times of my life, and it always feels good to be back here.
You joined me for a wonderful episode, one of my favorites, on the Herky's Voice episode. If you have missed the previous episode that we had with Amy Wilson during Herky's Voice, it's incredible. She gives us an amazing history, and she was here and integral in University of Iowa celebrating 50 years of Iowa women's athletics and 50 years of Title IX. And this is one more great visit that we've been able to have you come on back and be a part of Iowa City. And I know we had wanted you to be present this month to celebrate Iowa women's history, but to be in this moment coming off of the weekend we just had celebrating Senior Day at Iowa Women's Athletics, I have so much I want to go in and talk to you about. First, though, the way we've kind of structured our show is we like starting with a segment called Supporting Her. And Hawkeye Women Rise podcast is based upon our Hawkeye Women Rise Capital campaign, which is dedicated to supporting Iowa women's athletics and fundraising efforts here at the University of Iowa, and all ships rise together. And this is a really important capital campaign. We have so many important facility upgrades that we are working on currently to be able to give our student athletes the best experience. I know this is something that you think is really, really special at the University of Iowa.
It is, and I was one of the ones cheering the loudest when AD Getz was made the permanent AD, and then to see the vision for let's support all of our women's sports and everyone rise together. And I follow the teams. I'm just so excited about the idea of our always nationally ranked field hockey team having a building and up to par with some of those they're competing against. I just think about the potential here, and it's so exciting, and it's what our student athletes here deserve. They're the best of the best, and let's support them in that way.
I think sometimes you can often look at the success that's happening at Iowa and think that we have all of our needs met, but we're continuing to raise the bar and continuing to want to be able to provide the best resources for our women student athletes to be able to go out and compete, and that's really the mission of Hawkeye Women Rise. And the podcast is really just elevating that capital campaign and hopefully taking that to our Hawkeye community monthly so that we can kind of update everybody on the progress. In addition to the capital campaign, the other way that we love talking about the Support Her segment is just getting out to the events and setting attendance records and being present to cheer on all of our sports. Of course, we love it when you're at all the women's events. And our Hawkeye fans set the bar at an incredible level on Sunday, March 3rd at Senior Day at Carver Hawkeye Arena. There was no better example of supporting Iowa women's athletics than that Carver Hawkeye Arena being completely filled.
Yeah, it was a magical day. It's hard to even put into words. It was historic, and I couldn't help but think about Dr. Grant and how proud she was when Carver was full in '85 and the 22,000 and breaking the fire the fire code, and it just felt like a full circle moment, and really special.
My good friend Lisa Salucci pointed out to me that in 1985 we set that record and the opponent was Ohio State.
Yeah.
And last Sunday we had the magical day in Carver Hawkeye Arena again against Ohio State, and 2 wins for the Hawks too, which is fantastic. I'm still reflecting on Sunday and still being able to kind of take in what an incredible energy that was in that facility. It was the excitement was unprecedented, and it really felt like a red carpet event as I looked around and saw all of the incredible celebrities that came in from all around the country. It's the hottest ticket in college sports right now to watch Iowa women's basketball.
Oh, it is, and it was special to see stars everywhere, but it was also extraordinary to have the history of women's sports honored in so many ways. And I know we're going to talk more about that, and great athletes who have inspired our current student athletes, and records being broken. So it was done the right way. I give a lot of credit to University of Iowa athletics. I know Kelsey Lavadier is right behind us, and she was instrumental in when you're on the phone at 10 o'clock at night with Lynette Woodard's folks and making sure that happens. When a place knows its history and then celebrates it, that's special stuff, and that's exactly what happened on Sunday.
You and I have talked about that. As great as all of these moments coming together have been, I think it is uniquely special because it happens here, and I want to talk a lot about that.
Yeah.
But to kind of further on our updates for women's basketball, we can now announce that they are the 2 seed going to the Big Ten Championships up in Minneapolis. They will play the winner of the Wisconsin-Penn State game Friday at 5:30 in the Target Center. Iowa has won both previous games against Wisconsin and Penn State during the regular season. The Women's Big Ten Championship is taking place at Target Arena, and it is a complete sellout. And it is really, really exciting to be able to see all of the people traveling in. Last year we called it Carver North. I'm sure it'll be Carver North again. 2 years ago, the Big Ten Conference made the decision to create a new position, Vice President of Women's Basketball in the Big Ten. And this was a position that I was applauding because I felt like it was really for the first time being able to create a position that was going to be able to elevate, develop, and promote women's basketball on a level separate from men's basketball. And moving into that position was an incredibly talented woman called Megan Kahn. And I know you know Megan personally.
Yeah, Megan's a good friend of mine. Before becoming the vice president of women's basketball at the Big Ten, she led a national organization called We Coach that brings together coaches from across the nation, female coaches. It's a great organization. When she left, Vanessa Fuchs is now the CEO and doing great work too, but Megan was the right person at the right time to lead the Big Ten. And I got to see her Sunday and give her a hug and tell her that. And I said, congratulations on the sellout. And she told me that when she took the job a few years ago, she told those who were interviewing her, we're going to sell out in a couple years. And they have. So it was prophetic that she made that announcement. So exciting weekend ahead.
Part of her vision in terms of separating out the women's basketball championship from Indianapolis, where it's been previously held the week before the men's, it was kind of always seen as a warm-up to the men's tournament, and separating it out, making its own standalone event, having corporate sponsorships, and being able to promote it on its own is really part of the vision. And all of those decisions have been made, and we're all kind of creating this perfect moment in time right now to be able to celebrate that. But I really applaud the Big Ten for understanding the importance of that and creating a position to do that exclusively. So we're going to have an incredible time celebrating our Big Ten championships for women's basketball, so pay attention to that, and we'll cheer them on. I want to take a moment. I don't normally talk about tennis on this podcast or my team.
You should.
But I do want to say that we had a home event 2 weeks ago on a Friday night at 5 p.m. against Oregon, and no doubt we had the most number of people attending a women's Iowa tennis match than I've ever seen. So as much as this is happening in basketball, and we've set records at wrestling and field hockey, in my sport, we were overwhelmed by the amount of people that came on a Friday night to cheer us on, and I think we had 4 or 5 high school teams that were there watching, wow, and the community members that were there. And I just want to say thank you to all the Hawkeye fans that continue to support all of the different teams. It means the world to us. We had a heartbreaker that we finished a really clincher in a heartbreaker, and we're on the short side of a 4-3 loss to Oregon, but they have won 5 of their last 6.
That's great.
We just had a home opener and beat Indiana on the road, and we'll go play Nebraska this weekend. And we did not know this as we went into the Iowa State match, but I have been told by many people that our win against Iowa State clinched the Cy-Hawk series for Iowa this year. So that was exciting. And maybe a good thing that we didn't know going into that match that it was coming down to tennis.
A little extra pressure there.
But we're happy to claim that. So that's the update from women's tennis. We also have a very exciting time period, and I want to talk to you about women's collegiate wrestling. Our wrestling program is heading to Cedar Rapids on March 8th. They're going to be taking on the national championships. Tough competition. They've excelled in their first year out there, and I know they are hungry for this championship. Whatever happens in Cedar Rapids this year has been an incredible success story for Iowa wrestling. And I know this has really been something that you've been watching as it becomes an emerging NCAA sport.
Yeah, so the NCAA has a program called Emerging Sports for Women, and it's a fast track for women's sports to gain championship status. And so we have 180 different membership committees that we work with. One of those is the Committee on Women's Athletics. So there was a historic vote in February where the Committee on Women's Athletics, which is made up of presidents and ADs and student athletes and administrators, coaches, said wrestling's met the requirements. There are 40 teams across the country, and let's recommend it to be a championship. Now each of the divisions, 1, 2, and 3 in our system, will vote in the upcoming months. And if all goes as planned, the first NCAA Women's Wrestling Championship would be in the winter of 2026. So, and I'll just say, for Division I, Iowa's the lead. There are only a few teams right now in Division I. We're hoping that as this moves forward, it will catch fire and there'll be more, Division I schools that want to start it. Right now, most of the teams are at Division II and III. So, a lot of credit to Iowa for being out in front. It's not surprising. I'm a wrestling fan. A lot of my family that it's the state of Iowa that's doing this, and I'll just add that as we just celebrated Title IX's 50th anniversary, as you look at the history of the law, often it was a lot of just angst between men's wrestling and Title IX and gender equity, that hey, men's wrestling teams are being cut because of Title IX. And I think as we get to this 50 years and we see the opportunity for men's and women's wrestling to rise together, and I'm hoping as women's wrestling grows, it's a reason for schools to say, hey, we're going to have men's wrestling or keep that, and we can rise together. So seeing that is a really fitting, I think, at this 50th anniversary as we just passed that as well.
And an example that Iowa can lead on to for elevating both programs at the same time. It's an exciting time as we wrap up winter sports as they go into their Big Ten championships and postseason play, and we also get revved up with all of our spring sports going. So also we want to give a shout out to our dive team, which is actually competing for the NCAA diving championships. We've got a bunch of athletes that are going for swimming and diving, and the National Invitational Championships will be March 14th to the 16th for our swim and dive team, so good luck to them. We also have very exciting track and field as they go into the indoor season. The NCAA championships are going to be held in Boston upcoming, and we have Paige Magee, who holds the NCAA's number 6 seed in the 60-meter hurdles, and she's Iowa's all-time school record holder with a personal record of 7.99 under that 8-second mark. Wow. Really incredible. We've also got some athletes competing in the triple jump, and this will be really exciting to follow along them as they transition from the indoor season to the outdoor season. Also, heading down south and being able to get either in Florida and now out to California is softball. So they're out getting ready to get going. They've got a couple games upcoming against Santa Clara. They were off last weekend, and they're going to be heading west for spring break. So we wish them all of the best there. I want to talk about Iowa women's golf. They had an incredible weekend. They set some records. I don't know if you heard about this, Amy, but they were in New Orleans. They had a record-breaking weekend at the Westbrook Spring Invitational. They finished the team with leading at 18-hole, 36 holes, and the 50-hole school leaders. So I'm really excited about them. They shot a final round 279, 9 under to finish with the 54-hole school record book. So I'm really excited for Megan and Allison and their crew and wish them best as they're starting to get going and in the middle of their season. Men's and women's golf will be competing in Jacksonville. We have so many things going on and so much excitement in Iowa athletics, especially as we head into these Big Ten championships. So we appreciate all of you out there and the Hawkeye fans. Keep the energy high as we go into March and April. When we come back, we're going to finish up with our Inspire Her segment, where I'm going to be able to really get into the weeds with Amy and give us some historical context in terms of all of the incredible special moments that are happening right now at the University of Iowa. We'll be right back.
The Iowa City Area Sports Commission is responsible for our community being home to countless amateur sporting events and state tournaments. From state volleyball, wrestling, tennis, and much, much more, the Sports Commission generates significant annual economic impact while adding substantially to our quality of life. The Iowa City Area Sports Commission is a proud presenting sponsor of UI Women's Athletics. Learn more at wegotnext.org.
If you are a young woman playing sports in this country and you are watching what these young women are doing, not just what Caitlin Clark and women's basketball is doing, but what field hockey is doing, this opportunity to launch women's wrestling and soccer and rowing and so many others, why not come to the University of Iowa? Because you're going to be embraced here, you're going to have incredible opportunities in competition, and we are going to support you. The community is going to support you, and we've got the tradition to do that, the history to do that, and the track record. Yes, this is a destination for our young female athletes, no doubt about it.
And the Iowa Hawkeyes are your 2023 Big Ten Tournament champions.
Hawkeye Women Rise is our campaign to support all women's athletic teams here at Iowa. We are building a practice facility for our gymnastics program and spirit squads, and an operations building for our field hockey team, and that's just the beginning. These projects and the goals and plans ahead will be made possible thanks to the generous support of our donors and friends. Selling out the home women's basketball schedule and our first trip to the national championship game are 2 accomplishments we are really proud of, and you are part of that. We plan to keep it going, and we do that thanks to your generous support. The women who wear the black and gold are capable of absolutely amazing things. Thank you for providing the resources and the support for them to passionately pursue their goals. Please visit HawkeyeWomenRise.org to learn more.
Welcome back to our Inspire Her segment at the Hawkeye Women Rise podcast here at the Athletic Club. Thank you to our amazing sponsor, the Iowa City Area Sports Commission. In this segment, we're going to have a chance to really honor this month of March in women's history and really celebrate the tradition of Iowa women's athletics. When I thought about this segment, I thought maybe a place we could start, Amy, was of the many incredible gifts that have come from Caitlin and women's basketball this season. I think that the spotlight that has come and been shown on the historic records is a really special conversation that we could maybe have. I know that Lisa Bluter's ability to be vocal about bringing attention to the major college basketball career scoring leaders from the AIAW era has been really important, and we're having a conversation nationwide now that we hadn't had before, and also being able to see Lynette Woodward come to Iowa on Sunday and be recognized as Caitlin and Lynette kind of passed the torch on that record. Can you talk a little bit about the historical context of the AIAW and the NCAA and how it goes back and how it's uniquely tied to our history here at the University of Iowa?
Yeah, there's no other place in the country that has the history that Iowa does with this organization, and that's largely because 3 women leaders here at Iowa played really important roles in the organization. But Dr. Grant called it a perfect storm in the late 60s, early 70s, where we had Title IX being passed in 72. There was the women's movement happening. We had Battle of the Sexes, where Billie Jean King played Bobby Riggs, and along with that, in 1971, and I brought the voting paddle from their convention. This was Dr. Grant's paddle that she would vote on legislation. The Association for Intercollegiate Athletics for Women was formed, and the reason this organization formed was that the NSA said we're not interested in women's sports. And so, female physical most of them were female or physical educators across the country, were professors in departments, said, we'll do it. They were coaching all the sports, they were driving their own cars, they were all wearing the same uniforms. We've heard these stories about how it all started, but an all-volunteer organization was the largest sport organization in the country by the end of the decade. So they did phenomenal work from a volunteer basis, but they were the ones, with Title IX happening, that really launched women's college sports, particularly having championships. And so to know that history and how important that was, and then as they were trying to get this organization going, they were also trying to save the law, because many fought Title IX's application to athletics, including the NCAA, filed lawsuits, hired lobbyists, because it was seen as a real threat to men's sports. So the irony is that the AIW, ended in the early 80s, but their existence meant that I think, saved Title IX's application to athletics. And so, they gave a lot of themselves. Their whole hearts and souls were in that organization. So really special.
And Dr. Grant's vision and the leaders beyond Dr. Grant for the AIAW was a very student-athlete-centered organization where really the student-athletes' best interests were put in the forefront. And the ideas that they had at that time period of really elevating women's championships in all areas was remarkable. And I know I've heard you speak on behalf of saying that Dr. Grant had told you that the vote to have the NCAA, take over for the AIAW was one of the most disappointing moments that she had in her career. And how did she handle that, and how did she regroup?
So at the vote at the NCAA convention where that happened, she went up and spoke at the microphone. She was catcalled. She was shouted out. There were people drawing caricatures of her. When the first vote happened, it didn't go in favor of the NCAA, and then they adjourned and somebody called for a revote. Everybody went out and they came back in and voted again, and it was and her dear friends Peg Burke and Bonnie Slatton said the lowest moment of her life, because this was the organization that she had led. She was the president. Peg Burke, who was here, was a president. Bonnie Slatton served as executive director. But it was a really low moment. And what happened to women who were in athletics, a lot of them, as the NCAA took over, most schools merged their departments. Iowa was one of the few that kept it separate for so long. When they merged, women lost their power in leading. They were often moved down or moved out of athletics. So not only had they lost their national organization, they had lost their leadership opportunities in athletics. And then another huge thing happens where there's a Supreme Court case where Title IX's application to athletics in the 80s disappears for about 5 years. So it was if you asked Dr. Grant about the 80s, it was a pretty low moment in terms of all that they'd worked for in the 70s. And when I talk about the history of Title IX and women's sports, I talk about it being a roller coaster of ups and downs. And it's something we can't get complacent with and just say, oh, we've made it, we're fine. There's always that next challenge or that next thing that's happening. So, yeah.
And I think the unique place here at the University of Iowa where we have student athletes and coaches that are really educated on this history.
Yeah.
Specifically, Coach Lisa Bluter. And Lisa Bluter's ability to go to press conferences and to be able to speak informed about the AIAW and the comments that she had made about Caitlin's record being broken.
The real record.
The real record.
Yeah.
that has elevated the national conversation. And she said, women played sports before 1982.
They sure did. And, it's really important that we preserve that history. It's Coach Bluter. I've spoken to her team about Title IX and the field hockey team with Coach Lucci. Others, it's important to know this and Iowa's role in it. And I think it should be a major source of pride for the student athletes here. They stand on shoulders of giants in all that they do. And I give so much credit for Coach Bluter for using that platform that she had to talk about this. And, I had just started at the NCAA when Kelsey Plum broke the record. Certainly asked about that, talked to some of our committees. We don't count, anything that isn't NCAA specifically, and the coaches' wins don't count unless they've been a coach for 10 years in the NCAA, then they'll count some of the AIW wins. So there's all these rules they have in place. But I really turn to schools and say, what's your history? And how are you celebrating your pioneers? And then to have the vision to do it nationally. Lynette Woodard standing at center court on Sunday was extraordinary. And then we're talking about Pearl Moore, who was the small college AIW record, over 4,000 points that, I'm not going to count Caitlin Clark out for anything. So, it would be astronomical average for the next games through the end of all this, right? But, now those names are being talked about too. So as you said at the beginning, it's one of the many just great outcomes and benefits of everything that's happened in the past few years here, is that this history is being brought back to life. Because I talk to audience, I'm like, you ever heard of this organization? I get a lot of nope. I didn't know that there was a whole nother group that did this, and so quite remarkable.
Today you've come wearing your beautiful necklace. Can you talk
Grant
a little
t-shirt,
bit? Your Grant T-shirt and your beautiful necklace. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah. So when the last time I saw Dr. Grant before she passed away was in the late fall of 2021, and when I sat at her bedside, she gave me a little. And I've talked about this in the documentary, Unshakable Belief. But that was her gift to me. She wanted me to have her AIW necklace. I did wear it today. I haven't worn it since she gave it to me. I did wear it Sunday. I just felt like the Hawks needed that little extra push, and had the chance to see Coach Bluter before the game, and I pointed at it, and she got a little teary-eyed. She knew exactly what it was. So it just seemed right that Dr. Grant, this part of her, was there that day. So it's a really special gift for me, and it's a reminder that we got to keep working hard at this, because we got to treasure those who broke down the first barriers, and we got to keep pushing as we move forward. So.
When you've been able to get in front of our current student athletes and talk to them, what's the message that you shared with them? We have a field hockey student athlete here, Harper Dunn, who's been an incredible leader and taken such an interest in this, and I know that she was impacted by your speech to field hockey. I know you've spoken to women's basketball. What's the message that you carry in when you go talk to our current student athletes? Yeah, so one of the things I do just on a fundamental level is talk to them about how Title IX works. One of Dr. Grant's legacies, and why she's so well known, is that she was doing all this great work here in Iowa that the community knows about. At the same time, she was the national leading spokesperson on Title IX, teaching people about how the law worked, and then also doing, keeping track of the data. What do the participation numbers look like nationally? How much money is being spent? What about the leadership numbers? How many women are coaching and leading in, athletics departments, things like that. So I'll just teach them how the law works. Knowledge is power. When you know how the law works, then you know the right questions to ask. You know the rights that you have. So, and I also do the history of the law to let them know. I love it too when I speak to student groups like those where Harper was part of. They don't anymore say, well, I've not been given an opportunity. Like, I was told I don't get to play. But what you will see is them saying, well, wait a minute. I don't think I was treated quite the same as some of my peers that played on the boys or men's teams. So the access to opportunity is a lot better, but there's still those sorts of things. So I think it's just making sure they're amazing, intelligent, our future leaders, that they have what they need to go effectuate the change they want to see happen. And we saw that happen in 2021 at the NCAA women's basketball tournament.
Yeah, my job at the NCAA was all external facing, supporting our 1,100 schools, 100 conferences, with access, opportunity, equity, that kind of work. And the tweet, right, that was heard around the world of the 2 weight rooms, one in Indianapolis and one in San Antonio. And wow, that was tough. And so my job changed. I got brought internal to do a lot more equity works for the last few years. I've spent a lot of time in meetings talking about equity and educating, and I give a lot of credit to my colleagues at the NCAA who, said this is an opportunity and we need to make change. So we're doing some really, I'll just give one example. We have developed a system at the NCAA where equity questions can be asked proactively. I worked on one this morning. It has to do with Wi-Fi in the student lounges at the Final Four, making sure all our student athletes in the spaces they're in have the Wi-Fi they need to do whatever whether it's homework or whatever they're doing. And so it's a system we can put those questions in and say, if we need to spend the money to make that comparable and equitable, we're going to do it. So I think about Dr. Grant's legacy. I think about continuing to push for change, and I'm happy to be at the table. And I got to talk to her about that before she passed. She said, it's awful that happened, but the door got pushed open, push it further and work on change. So I'm certainly doing that every day with a lot of really dedicated people across the national office.
Of the many amazing moments last Sunday on March 3rd on Carver, it was one of the moments when we had interviewed Maya Moore on court and were asked her thoughts, and she said, I've always believed if you give women's basketball a chance to be seen, and women's athletics in general speaking, that people will like this and they will enjoy it. And that remark by her made me think of early in Dr. Grant's AIA tenure, where she really worked hard to create a TV contract with NBC. Yeah. And she was so forward-thinking in 1981 to have a contract with NBC to have all of the AIAW championships on television, and that was never able to come to light. Mm-hmm. Fast forward to today in 2024, and our women's basketball team has set the network highest viewership on 6 different platforms across for viewerships at their games.
Right.
That's a full circle moment.
It is, and the AIW was a volunteer organization, and they didn't have money to pay for the teams to travel, and like the NCAA did, so that TV contract was essential. It's a really neat story because the president of NBC had a mom who was a high school athletics director and taught him to believe in the value of girls' sports. So when the AIW leadership sat down with him, they negotiated that not only would the division, they didn't have Division 1, 2, and 3, but not only would the larger schools get coverage, but it would cover all of the AIW championships. And they were finally going to have some money to start paying the way. I mean, they were seeing that as the next step, and that's when the NCAA came in and said, well, we can't beat Title IX, and we can't, we're gonna start our own here, kind of thing. And so, but I could not help but think about her smiling down and seeing that. And they're not done yet. What's going to happen at the Big Ten tournament that's ongoing now, and we're going to see Iowa playing tomorrow, and all of this. What's going to happen there? I just think I could see records continuing to be broken, which is extraordinary. Yeah.
One of the things that I've enjoyed having conversations with you over the last couple of days is just being able to take a moment and understand the magic of all of this happening, because I really do believe that this isn't just a fluke. It just didn't happen. If you look at the threads that have been woven between the past and the trailblazing women that were here with the ideas and the vision for eventually what women's athletics, one, can empower a woman in their life, and the opportunities that when you allow them to fully reach their full potential in all ways, what an impact that would make on our society as a whole, and how that started here. And we can maybe trace back to the AIAW merger or hostile takeover by the NCAA as setting that back. And maybe it's taken 50 years to kind of continue to do the work and to affect change. But to have the change take place at this moment in time, back at the University of Iowa, is, that's what I think is the magical moment, and I hope for our Hawkeye community that they can take pride in understanding the historical context that was laid for that all to be able to happen again here.
Yeah, it's special that it's happening at Iowa. I mean, the AIW motto was, "This is all for the enrichment of the life of the participant." And you just feel that everywhere you are here with the quality student athletes. And, when you put all this together, you look at the 50-year celebration of Title IX, the 50-year celebration of athletics, women's athletics here, which I got to be part of, hiring of Beth Getz. I mean, only about less than 15% of Division I schools have a woman leading their athletics department. And when you go to Power 5, the number is even smaller. This is historic, right? I give a lot of credit to President Wilson and to others. So there's been so many things that have happened. The crossover at Kinnick. You just can keep writing the list down. And so it does feel like that full circle moment. But when you are building on a foundation of excellence and doing it for the right reasons, for those student athletes to get the opportunities, in some ways it's not surprising, right, of where it's headed. So.
And I also think about the time period when Caitlin was here in the University of Iowa, was while we were going through our 50-year anniversaries of Title IX and of Iowa women's athletics, and our student athletes that have been able to be enrolled at Iowa and competing at Iowa during those two celebrations have really been immersed in the historical celebrations and the education, which has been beautiful. And I know Caitlin's been able to speak so intelligently on the kind of this perspective of what it means to come, after the Trailblazers, but then also to be able to set an example for the future.
Yeah, it's special when the athletes give that credit to those who came before them and have a vision of the bigger picture. Caitlin's certainly done that, and I know a lot of the other athletes do too, just in the interactions I've had with them. And so, when you told me about everybody gathering in Carver to watch Unshakable Belief and to know that history of the place that they're at, that really moved me to know.
That was an incredible moment. I've talked about that a few times. That was in August. We had a premiere with all the student athletes a couple years ago when we premiered it, and it was palpable, the pride and the energy that was felt by being a part of all of my peers that were coaches and all the student athletes being able to watch back. And really something about the documentary brought that to you in such an emotional way that you couldn't help but be touched. And I encouraged everybody, of all the Hawkeye fans who haven't seen Unshakable Belief, to go onto HawkeyeSports.com and find the link and watch that documentary. Amy's featured in it, and the story is incredible. And I really do think that so much of the impression of our student athletes and the pride and the superpower that we feel in our history and our legacy was able to be told by that documentary.
Yeah, super special. And I think about one of my favorite parts of that documentary, and I might cry every time, so it's your fault, is when you say, when you were at her bedside and she told you, I can't walk anymore, and you said, well, it's time that we do that for you. I think about that a lot, because the best thank you we can give to those leaders and that our current student athletes can give is that we're going to continue to do this the right way and fight for equity and what's right. That's the best way to honor that legacy, for sure.
Yeah. Along those same lines, the other quote that there's so much happening on Sunday that I still have had to reflect on it, but when Holly Rowe took the mic, one of my favorite sports announcers who's really just been passionate about raising the profile of women's sports on television, whether it be softball or WNBA.
She's everywhere, isn't she?
She's everywhere. She is fantastic. And to have her in Carver and actually be the MC for our senior day, what a moment. But she really challenged the fans that were at Carver Hawkeye Arena to say, come back next year. And we know Caitlin has declared, and Caitlin Clark will not be competing in a Hawkeye uniform next year, but she challenged the fans to continue to sell out and continue to show up for women's sports. And that really is the next phase.
It is, right? To see the next group that will bring the excellence. It made me smile really big when you told the story earlier about the turnout to your tennis match against Oregon recently. So, and we're seeing, the number of people that showed up for the first wrestling meet that was here, right? Set a world record for, people watching women's wrestling. So I know the community here, Iowa itself and beyond are committed to that. So that was a great challenge by Holly to say, keep coming, keep supporting, and let's keep this wave of excellence going. Yeah.
Incredible time, and I appreciate you. I think you are the perfect person to give us the historical context and to be able to link the past with this moment in time and where we want to go from the future, because we're not done yet, and we're going to keep walking and we're going to keep working, and that's for sure. So we're going to take a quick moment, and when we come back, we're going to take your questions in our Empower Her segment for Dr. Amy Wilson. We'll be right back.
As many of you know, Beth is a tremendous leader who will really take athletics to the next level here at the University of Iowa. It's my delight and honor to welcome Beth Getz as our new athletic director. Please.
My pledge to all of you here today is to lead the University of Iowa with this foundation. I will serve with integrity, transparency, and a relentless drive for success. We will chase winning. We will be champions in competition and in preparing our young men and women for the next 40 years of their lives. Our commitment is to earn the pride and passion of the Hawkeye faithful every step of the way. Together we will serve to unite and bring pride to this great Hawkeye community. I want you all to know how excited I am to write this next chapter here with you. Let's go. Together we fight for Iowa. Go Hawks.
Who would have thought that a small-town kid from Iowa would be here today?
Can't thank them enough for all they've done. And each and every one of these guys really has embodied, what it means to be a Hawkeye.
Seriously, this is a great moment for us as a university. We have an incredible thing here, and we're not done yet.
The Portland Trail Blazers select Chris Murray from the University of Iowa.
Fans rise to their feet at a packed Dwayne Banks Field today. Cold third strike.
The thing that I appreciate the most about Spencer Lee is he never batted an eye and shied away from it because he is a ferocious competitor. Make no mistake about it. To the very last second till we're running out the clock.
Sanford! Who got it? Inconceivable! Iowa wins it!
How did this team do it? Very few thought you could.
All we do is believe in one another, and we love each other to death, and that's what a true team is.
There's nothing like being a part of Hawkeye Nation.
We gon' take it to the top. We ain't never giving up. We ain't never gonna stop till the very last second till we're running out the clock.
Here's Clark. She fires.
The Hawkeyes are headed to the national championship game.
We're going to the national championship!
To the very last second till we're running out the clock. We ain't never backing down. We ain't never gonna stop. We gon' take it to the limit. We gon' take it to the top. We ain't never giving up. We ain't never gonna stop till the very last second till we're running out the clock.
Welcome back to Hawkeye Women Rise, our podcast here at the Athletic Club in the Iowa River Landing. Thank you to the Iowa City Area Sports Commission for sponsoring this podcast and so many of our Iowa women's sports. I would be remiss if I did not mention that we want to congratulate Kate Martin and Hannah Stuelke on being named second team All Big Ten and first team All Big Ten, Caitlin Clark, and for the third time, Big Ten Player of the Year. Congratulations, Caitlin Clark. Very exciting.
Exciting news today. Yeah, well earned.
Well earned. And we've gotten some questions from our audience. Amy, let's start with a question you've received.
Yeah, this is an excellent one. It's quite long. I'll kind of summarize it, but this is from someone who studies college sports and is paying attention to the most important issues today. But it's a question that starts by noting that there is a movement towards a more professional college sports model in many ways. And it's a concern about, the money that's part of that, the burden on athletic departments, and what will be the impact on equity as we look at women's sports and just opportunities overall, and what should we watch out for? So that's a great question. It is kind of the question of the day, I think. I'll first start by saying that I think the NCAA got extraordinarily lucky that Charlie Baker stopped being the governor of Massachusetts, ended his 2-year term, and decided to dip into college sports. And I'll say about President Baker that one of the first stories I heard him tell was that his wife was the best athlete in his family. He played basketball at Harvard and his 2 sons played football, but that his wife, who was a gymnast at Northwestern, he also knew in detail the stories of how her sport experience was inequitable to her male counterparts and what her experience was like as an athlete. And that's wrong. He's like, we got to do this right. So as President Baker has suggested different models and, would the FBS schools be doing something different and how do we navigate this litigious, world we're in, lawsuits everywhere, he has said over and over again that, this is educational sport and Title IX is going to apply, particularly if athletic departments get more involved in NIL or in the, the funds that are going to athletes. And so I think that's critical because if Title IX is part of this, then there does need to be equity based on participation enrollment. It's not part of like the laundry list of Title IX per se, but it's a treatment or benefit. So I think the worry is that obviously is that the revenue sports are put up on such a pedestal that when you look at men's Olympic sports and some of the women's sports are going to be left behind, or we're going to see money that's there moving away. So it's something we have to be really careful about. And I've said to a lot of people, The NCAA should just go away, and we should pay them whatever they, be careful what you wish for, because the educational model that we're used to, and I'm all for NIL. I'm excited when I see Caitlin Clark on a commercial, and I see, student athletes getting a chance to use the fame that they've rightly earned. I think that's great. But I also hope we can keep this, within a model that allows us to have broad-based sport programs. So I think what I would say is to watch out for is to ask about the ramifications of different ways forward. And before you jump on a bandwagon with something, how's that going to affect the larger, the larger group of student athletes as well? And we still want those that are the stars to get that credit, that credibility, and to be able to, the coaches are earning millions. Lots of people are making money off the system. Our student athletes deserve that share. I wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be here. None of us would be here without these student athletes, and we need to remember that all the time. But it is a time unlike any other in college sports, for sure.
It is definitely a changing landscape of collegiate sports, and it is something at the forefront of so many people that are up close and personal to college athletics. So I appreciate that perspective, and I think your voice is a voice that is important and needs to be heard. And we've got some good leaders, and I've said many times, thank goodness, that we've got Beth Getz leading our athletic department as we navigate the changing landscape. So
and I'll just say too how excited Dr. Grant would be about that. And she was big on be prepared. Be the one in the room who has the facts, who knows the data, put the time in to deserve where you're at and I just look at Beth's career and the different stops she's had at, from, Butler to Connecticut to Minnesota to leading at Ball State to coming here, and the experience she brings to this role. And Dr. Grant would be ecstatic to know that there's a woman leading Iowa athletics. Special time.
I've got a couple more questions for you.
All right.
Okay. Can you? And this is kind of a little bit of a softball, and we talked a lot of it. But one of our audience members has just asked. We're just curious, Amy. What do you think makes Iowa special?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've been hearing that phrase, the epicenter of women's athletics, and I know I'm biased. I wrote my dissertation on the AIW. I mean, that's what my PhD work was focused. So there's a bit of a bias there, but I think it's special because of. As all of this was starting, Iowa was front and center. It was leaders here, and it was a different way. And I want to give credit to the male allies in this, because Dr. Grant talked often about how if there hadn't been allies on the male side of athletics when the departments were separate, she couldn't have been a national spokesperson. It all couldn't have grown together. So I think it's special because Iowa got it. Mm-hmm. They got it that we all, lift as you rise. We can all rise together. It doesn't have to be the men up here and the women. We can all do this together. And so I think, again, when you build on that foundation of excellence, and I know not everything's been perfect, nobody has a perfect history, but it sure feels like this is on one of those upward trajectories in so many ways. So I think that's a big part of it, doing it the right way.
And our last question, interesting, kind of taking a look at expanding. So looking at what is happening with Iowa women's basketball, how can you use that momentum to kind of elevate just what you're talking about, all ships rise, for all women's sports at Iowa, but all women's sports in general, kind of a big picture look as we kind of set out into the next 50 years? Yeah, well, I think a lot of it is about, promotion and marketing, and that's a benefit area of Title IX. Are you doing that for your women's teams? I mentioned earlier Kelsey Lavadier and the work to get Lynette Woodard here, and just the overall way that you're positioning your women's sports, and the campaign that AD Getz saw as a vision. Let's do this for all women. I think those sorts of things matter a lot, and I think because when people get exposure, you said this earlier, they fall in love with this stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if you're going to have some of those same folks coming back to watch another tennis match for you, right? So it's getting people there, it's getting them engaged, and I also think. It's getting them to know the personal stories of the student athletes. One of the things I'm most excited about the new media rights agreement that Charlie Baker and his staff negotiated, by the way, historic, 3 times the amount of money. We hopefully can now do units for women's basketball. There's lots of things happening like the men's tournament, is that it includes telling student athlete stories and promotions and all sorts of things for student athletes that are going to be required by the network as well. So I think that's part of it. When people know the student athletes and what incredible people they are, like Harper sitting just a few feet away from me on the field hockey team, you can't help but fall in love with that and want to cheer for these. And these are our future leaders, right? These are going to be our change makers, not just in sports, but in all areas of our society. I love that. I'm a big fan of storytelling, and I think that is probably where we start with all of this and connecting. We got a lot of wonderful people to tell stories about and connect. And you're one of them. So thank you, Amy.
Well, I'm a proud alum. I love coming back here, and I was just honored to get to be part of that crowd on Sunday. And I can't wait to not only cheer on basketball, but all the teams. As you noted, a lot of stuff happening this weekend, and there's a lot to celebrate here at the University of Iowa.
Come back soon.
I will. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Amy. And thank you, Hawkeye fans. We will be back in April and have much more to celebrate then. And as always, go Hawks.
This has been the Hawkeye Women Rise podcast, presented by the Iowa City Area Sports Commission. Hawkeye fans, remember to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast app. Once you become a Fight for Iowa podcast subscriber, you'll automatically receive the latest episodes of the Fight for Iowa podcast, the Hawkeye Women Rise podcast, Hawk Talk replays, exclusive game content, and more. Until next time, on Iowa, and go Hawks! The preceding has been a Learfield presentation on the Hawkeye Sports Network.